We don't have to look far for examples of human beings being bad to other human beings. In truth, it happens every day. It happens multiple times a day. But some weeks we're reminded of it more than others. And for me, this is one of those weeks. The death of George Floyd brought up such a variety of responses in me. Compassion for him. My own anger and frustration. Disappointment in humankind. And such a strong reminder of the trance that we fall into whenever we are pulled away from our nature, triggered into our ego structure. And a tremendous amount of gratitude for this work that we've been spending the spring with, Tara Brach's Radical Compassion. We've been now studying this book for 6 weeks. We're finishing up today as we look at chapters 10 and 11. But I'm going to use George Floyd as the example, as a case study maybe, of the subject of chapter 10, compassion. What is compassion? In truth, it's an expression, an aspect of our true nature. It flows as needed in the moment. Unfortunately, as with all aspects of our true nature, we can't just summon them up. They arise appropriately, as needed, in the moment. And compassion has such a powerful impact on our ability as human beings to live in community, to understand one another. For you see, compassion reminds us that we're having a shared experience. That as we come to hear and understand the story of another, compassion rises. And anything that was hard or feeling hurt inside of us seems to melt away. I can't tell you the number of times that I felt hurt or frustrated by someone and reached out to get clarification on what exactly did you mean? Or what was happening in this situation? And as they've shared with me, my heart has broken open. And whatever it was that seemed to be holding me separate from them dissolves, and dissolves seemingly instantly. Of course, there can be different degrees, right, of hurt. I'm not saying that compassion necessarily works for all of us in an instant, but it is truly an amazing quality that allows us to come back to a place of open-hearted connection and community. The challenge with any aspect of true nature is that if we have strong beliefs that then become patterned ways of being, they tend to block, maybe is a good word, the expression of our nature in that moment. Not all the time necessarily, but whenever something comes at us that pushes that button, that pushes up against that structure, the structure rises. And if it has something to do with compassion, it's some kind of armoring that we've needed to put over our hearts. We feel the need to protect, to control. Often there can be reactions of anger, hatred, strong reactions. We're cut off, and we become cut off from the other. What does Tara call it? The unreal other. They lose the qualities that we ourselves want to be seen for. They become the bad one because the ego structure is not a high-functioning structure. It thinks in black and white. So you're either good or bad, right or wrong. There's not this in-between. There's not the ability to see. And the trance can be very strong. That's what I saw when I watched the video of the whole interchange with George Floyd. I saw two officers that, in my opinion, were in major trance. But the interesting thing is that we don't actually know what was going on for those gentlemen. My compassion rose almost instantly for George Floyd, not only in the hearing of him asking for mercy, calling for mercy, but in the fact that when I was a kid, one of the kids in my neighborhood who bullied me regularly would shove his fingers up into my esophagus while he held me down so I could not respond and I could not breathe, and would hold me there until I got so dizzy and my whole vision started to blur. I had compassion, and that pushed up against my ego structure, and I was bloody angry at that policeman. I was projecting onto him my own experience. And this is where the power of rain comes in. Because you see, when we are willing to practice rain on a regular basis, we develop more and more consciousness as to, oh, I'm triggered. The recognition step, the R step of rain, becomes more easily recognizable for us. Our ego structure begins to soften. We become clued in to how we tend to respond or react to the world around us. And so while I wanted to make that officer bad, while I wanted that officer to spend the rest of his life in prison, an odd curiosity began to rise in me. And maybe this is a good place also to pause. How many of you could also feel that desire for that officer to be punished before we even knew what really was going on? In fact, I still don't know what was going on for that officer. I mean, I hear that, he had to be bigoted and must have hated black men and black people, but I don't really know. I mean, does he have a history of that? How do we know that his wife that morning didn't announce to him that she's been having an affair with his best friend and she'll be gone that night? How do we know This is the whole thing that happens. If we can't transcend the ego structure, then we're going to make the other wrong, pass judgment, before we even know. Now, compassion does not mean, in fact, none of the aspects of spirit mean that we don't hold people accountable, don't mean that we don't use force when force is needed, but there is an amazing quality in all the aspects for the right amount. That we know how much force to exert. We know when to not exert force. We know what to say and not to say. There's incredible wisdom and knowledge, understanding in spirit. You may be asking, what does it matter? What does it really matter if I am projecting all of my childhood anger onto a police officer, and from that anger, I really want him to suffer? It's just me doing my thing, right? Years ago, I had an amazing encounter with James Twyman. I've been racking my mind trying to figure out how this even happened. But I was the minister of a church in Capitol Hill. I don't know, maybe I reached out to him, but we were working with his book, Emissary of Light, a little study group that I had. We had a little Wednesday night study group. And the next thing I know, if I reached out to him or he reached out to me, he said, hey, I'm in Denver, and I don't have anything to do this week. Do you have any place where, are you gathering during the week where I could come and meet with some of your congregation? And the next thing I knew, he's meeting with us on Wednesday night. What I do remember was that something horrific had happened that week, similar to this week. One of those things that stood out, one of those things that, everyone was sort of reeling from. And I remember that as we checked in, people were, again, demonizing the perpetrators. And after we were all done, James said, I'd like to just introduce you to a different perspective. And he started out by just stating, do each of you realize that you have the capacity to kill someone? That it inherent in being a human being is that we have the capacity to kill someone. And it was quite surprising to me, the reactivity that came up. No one, I had happened to have an experience where I understood, getting in touch with my repressed feelings and the intensity of the experience that came out to me. I was able to nod and go, yeah, I understand I could kill somebody, but I also have some consciousness around it, so I don't think I'm going to. But no one else in the room was willing to own the fact that they could kill someone. How about you? What kind of reactivity are you having at the idea that as a human being, you could plot and kill someone, or in the rage of the moment, you could kill someone? He then took it a step further. He said, we often talk about the fact that we are individual expressions of spirit. But he said we don't recognize that we are also one organism. We think that we are individuals, that we are separate. But the truth is that we are one, and in that oneness, we are one organization, one organism. And just as you as an individual can try and repress what's going on for you, it leaks out. And so as long as we're not willing to own those strong feelings that we have, as long as we're not willing to get in touch with that as repressed in us, it's going to leak out. And it leaks out in certain individuals. They become the expression for the culture. And I thought, well, that's an interesting idea. I was having a little bit of trouble getting my head around it. Is it really true, or is this something made up? And then a couple of years later, I had a counseling client. I'm going to just totally change all the circumstances here. But this person came to me, and in the most flat effect, would tell me the most horrific things. My uncle sodomized me. My mother regularly sexually abused me. Never any emotion at all. I would say, wow, that must have really hurt. No, well, it did. Yeah, it definitely hurt in the time, but no, I don't really feel anything about it. And as each session would go on, I would become more and more agitated and feel more and more angry. These weren't even my issues. None of these things that this person was dealing with are anything that I had dealt with. And by the time the person would get up and leave, I would have so much energy going through my system that I would want to pick my desk up. I mean, literally, I just wanted to pick my desk up and throw it out the window. Of course, I thought there was something wrong with me. Like, what is going on here? Until years later, I learned about projective identification, where when someone is not willing to own their own feelings, when they've repressed them so deeply, that they will show up in the receptive person that's with them. And I began to really get it. Wow, James was right, that certain souls are going to be receptive. So, the one thing that we can do is that when the rest of the world seemingly is jumping on the bandwagon with expressing their anger or their hatred, repressed. You can see it as you watch the videos of the demonstrations. I have so much compassion for these people. It's almost lifetimes of frustration coming out. But I don't need to add mine to that. That I can continue to be curious. I can continue to be monitoring what's happening in me and using the RAIN process to take that deep dive. What is it? What is it? How does this experience remind me of my own life and what is unhealed, unmetabolized in me that I want to push out and make somebody else wrong? Tara says beautifully that, actually, this is where I want to use that quote. Tara says, the realization of compassion brings the happiness of being truly open-hearted and is the hope for healing our planet. And that is the piece we want to focus on. It is the very hope for healing our planet. Because if we're feeling compassion, then that great connecting energy is at play that allows us to recognize we're actually having a shared experience. We've all been at a place where we could have killed someone. If not, email me and come in for a session. I will help you get to that. But when we're willing to get down to what hurts that made us want to do that, then compassion flows. And Tara poses two great questions. Where does it hurt? And what is it like being you? I would love to ask that policeman who had his knee on George's neck, where does it hurt? What's it like to be you? How many times have you been asked that? I belong to a spiritual community where that's asked all the time. But out in the world, I am so rarely asked that. In fact, think about it. Isn't it true that most people come to you insisting that you conform to the way they want it because nobody asks them that. No, and they never ask you why you did what you did or said what you did. What was going on for you that you said that? Instead, it's just like, you're bad. How could you do that? And yet, when we take the time to ask those questions, inevitably we discover that something about the answer is something we can relate to. It breaks our heart open. We realize that we really aren't alone. We're having a shared experience. Now, some of you may be experiencing your own resistance to the RAIN process. And I have compassion for that too. I many a times touched on a hurt that I was afraid was going to be too much, that it would consume me or I would never stop crying. But here's the fascinating thing about using a process like the RAIN, where you're going into it consciously, where you're not just letting it come out in sideways, leaky ways. When we go in, we're taking our presence into the issue with us. We are surrounding the issue in a holding of presence. And presence has two qualities. One, it is big, expansive, can hold. And two, will never let you have something be revealed that you aren't ready for. I came to that realization. I've been told that many times, and I really could feel that this week. And I'll also say that when you bring another person into that RAIN process with you, into the inquiry, their presence only strengthens your presence. It becomes almost an unstoppable capacity to hold. And you'll find that the healing on the other side is amazing. Just like Tara said, the realization of compassion brings the happiness of feeling truly open-hearted. It is impressive how beautiful it feels to not be repressing something, to let it up, to let it breathe, to let it have its time, to grieve, but to heal. Tara does a beautiful job in this chapter of making a distinction between empathy and compassion. In empathy, we are putting ourselves in the shoes of the other person. We're allowing ourselves to feel. And that is a leaping off point to compassion. You notice that I was able to very acutely put myself into George Floyd's situation because of my own shared experience with him. But if we get stuck there, which often if I haven't processed something, it's easy for me to get stuck there in the hurt of it, in the pain of it, in the anger of it. It's exhausting. It wears us out. It depletes us. Whereas when we're able to move to compassion, so if you're feeling yourself caught, you would want to move into the RAIN process because we just need to move deeper until the compassion for ourselves arises. Compassion never tires us. Any activity of spirit. Now, granted, when it first comes out, it might push against a lot of fears and stuff, and it may seem tiring. But when you have purified your consciousness enough that any of these qualities, including compassion, can just flow in you, they're actually life-giving. They wake you up. They make you feel inspired, alive, joyfully alive. They never distract. They will never burn you out. And another experience that I had that I'm sure, I'm unfortunately, I don't know exactly what happened here, but as part of my own coming to consciousness as part of my own healing, I began to feel like I was feeling all the pain of the world, of all sentient beings. I was, my heart was immensely impacted, and it was painful. I remember thinking, shoot, if this is what becoming spiritually evolved comes to, I've made a huge mistake here. It was intense. I just want you to let you know that if you are experiencing that, or if that happens to you in the future, that in less than a year, but it took about a year, that began to resolve in me. And I began to question, have I just shut my heart off again? But I don't think so. It doesn't feel that way to me. It feels like life is an ever-growing opportunity to develop capacity for what it means to be a human being, capacity for what it means to express who we are as spiritual beings. And so life is going to challenge us. Life is going to pull and push us. And our opportunity is to stay as conscious as we can, to remove whatever the barriers are. There will continue, well, I'm not going to hold that out. We may see a day. If everyone were to start practicing rain, we might see a day where these atrocities really begin to diminish to nearly nothing or nothing. We can all hold that image. But the truth is, each and every one of us has work to do. And the most powerful work we can do is the work here. The rain process offers us a magnificent tool for clearing away whatever it is that stands in the way of the natural flow of who we are as spiritual beings, including our compassion. And so the minute that you find yourself wanting to demonize another, wanting to punish, don't judge yourself, but simply recognize, oh, I'm projecting my own hurt, my own woundedness out. There's something that could be mined down in there that needs to be metabolized. And I, as an individual beacon of light, have the opportunity to begin to heal the planet by being willing to take the deep dive and to see what's going on for me. I'd like to invite you to move with me now into a time of meditation. I also would like to pull from a piece that Tara did in the book. I'm working from page 211 in the book. Take a few long, deep breaths. Relax any obvious tension in your body. Breathe into it. And arrive in presence. Now, review your day or the last couple of days. Remind yourself of someone you spent time with. Be curious about how attuned you were. How real did that person seem to you? Did you notice what kind of mood they were in? How they were feeling physically? What was important to them at the time you connected? What they might have been worried or anxious about? If they were relaxed, comfortable, and open with you? If they were tense or defensive with you? Whether anything in the interaction was difficult for them? Investigate without judgment. And as you deepen your attention, notice if the person you're reflecting on becomes more multifaceted, interesting, and real. And notice your heart's response to this person. Now you might think of someone you're going to be spending time with soon. Imagine entering this next encounter with the inquiry, what's it like being you? Or if they've been having difficulty, where does it hurt? And now we'll move into a time of the silence together as we allow those ideas to germinate in us.